And this morning on KRIM's Community Spotlight, we're talking with Mariah Lance from CASA of Gila County. Of course, CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. And first of all, Mariah, thanks for coming down to be with us again. It's always a pleasure to have you in here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you betcha. Now, last month we talked a little bit about the CASA in general, and just to kind of recap and give like the Reader's Digest condensed version, the court-appointed special advocates are speaking up for kids who can't speak for themselves necessarily when it comes to involvement in our court systems. Maybe there are challenges at home or whatever where parents are coming into question a little bit. I'm not sure exactly the best way to put all that, but am I on the right track that these are volunteers that come in and advocate on behalf of these kids when maybe no one else is effectively doing that for them?
That's correct. So our advocates go to the courtroom and speak to the judge and attorneys. They also advocate for the children when it comes to their medical and educational and behavioral health needs.
Mm-hmm. All right. And how long has CASA been around?
Here in Arizona for 35 years.
Wow, 35, probably starting to get the hang of it, huh?
Yes.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned coming in this morning is that you've had some people that wanted to volunteer, but they didn't, going in, they didn't really realize what kind of time commitment and that type of thing that this would entail. So let's start with that. Now, as far as volunteers, typically how many hours per week or per month does a volunteer actually have to be, working on a case?
So average is 10 to 20 hours a month, depending on the stage of the case, how many kids are in there, what's going on. Most of our advocates are about 1 to 2 hours a week, sometimes a little bit more. A lot of that time is spent either on a weekend or after work hours.
Mm-hmm.
But there is time during the work week also, like we go to court, so that's during the week. And if you're meeting with teachers or behavioral health, that would also be during normal working hours.
So there's times where the CASA volunteer would again go, like you say, go to meet with teachers or people at the school about concerns there, and then sometimes they have to go into court for proceedings there. What are some of the other types? I mean, obviously they're going to spend some time with the child, just learning about them and getting a dialogue established with them. Then, right?
Correct. So they meet with the child at least once a month to form a relationship. That way the child forms a trust relationship with them as an adult.
Right.
We kind of pride ourselves as being that one consistent person in a foster child's life. The CASA advocate remains with the child no matter how many placements that child has until they reach permanency. So every time a child has to move a foster care, and let's say they start in Payson and they have to move to Mesa, they start all over again with their school and educational and behavioral health, all of their needs. And that advocate can take that knowledge and information they already have and follow that child to wherever they go. Okay,
so backing up a little bit, and I know that there's probably lots of variables involved, but typically, if we can even say typically, what are the some of the main causes for a child to suddenly have a need for a CASA volunteer?
The children that we serve have an open dependency through the Superior Court, meaning that the Department of Child Safety has determined the child to be unsafe to be able to remain with at least one parent, and places them either with a family member, a family friend, or a licensed foster home.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And obviously the numbers that I remember you sharing before were pretty astounding as far as the number of kids here in Gila County who need a CASA volunteer versus the number of CASA volunteers that you have. And that's, that's a tragic truth, and I'm assuming that hasn't changed much since last month.
It hasn't. Right now we have about 120 children in Gila County that need a CASA volunteer.
Mm-hmm. And out of that 120 kids that are in need of a CASA volunteer, how many of them are right here in the Payson area?
We have about 40 kids here in Payson.
40. And so, so it's spread all over Gila County.
Correct.
Right. And now with some of the volunteers that you have, it seems like I remember you saying last month too that there are some volunteers that they may decide because maybe they're retired and they have the time to do it to take on more than one child. It's not necessarily just one adult, one child. Sometimes some of these volunteers take on multiple kids.
Correct. So when you get assigned a case, you get assigned to all the children in the case. So some cases there's one child, and sometimes there's 5 or 6 children. Depends on the family.
Right. That adds some interesting variables to the whole thing. But also, as far as this goes, it seems like I remember you saying that some of the people that were volunteering for a child here in Payson might also be volunteering to help a child in Globe or Southern Gila County or something. So that is doable.
Yes, it is. Especially in our world post-COVID, we've learned a lot about the virtual world and how we can use that to our advantage, especially in the CASA program.
Right.
Our CASA volunteers are able to attend school meetings, behavioral health, DCS meetings, court meetings, all virtually. So there's a limited amount of travel. The only thing that we don't allow to be virtual on a regular
Spent 25 years in prison as an axe murderer or something like that, I'm sure I might not really be the best volunteer for this.
Correct. We do run a FBI background check,
Right.
Which is just fingerprinting, and they're looking primarily at the most recent years for any felonies, and then any kind of child abuse or neglect
Right.
charges.
You got to make sure everything's staying safe for these kids. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, but a huge need. And one of the things that in talking with some CASA volunteers in the past, I mean, this really, I guess it's like anything in life. It comes down to how you deal with things. But I would think this would be profoundly gratifying. I mean, to find a kid that has these needs and be able to stand in the gap on that kid's behalf and advocate for them. I mean, what a beautiful gift that is to be giving to a kid that otherwise is at risk and might slip between some dangerous cracks.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. Our CASA volunteers talk about all the time that if you go into this just for self-gratification, you're probably not going to be happy, but to be able to look at a child and look back and see how much they've grown and how much you've been a part of that, that's where the reward comes from.
Right, and there's a commitment involved here. I mean, this is obviously not a, get your warm fuzzies this Thursday or anything like that. I mean, it's going to take time developing the relationship, developing the trust, and understanding everything that these kids have been through and where they're headed now and how to speak up on their behalf. I mean, what a wonderful thing. and or conversely, what a tragic thing if there isn't a volunteer to stand in that gap, because then, I mean, some of these kids are just kind of having to go it alone, and that's a terrible thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids that could benefit from somebody being in their corner and being that voice in the courtroom, not just of what they say they want, but also speaking in their best interest, because sometimes those aren't the same.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes too, with some of these kids that have been through some rather tumultuous things, oftentimes we find, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes they're really wise beyond their years. And sometimes there's a lot of defensive mechanisms that they've built up that may, take a little bit of time to weed through, but still gratifying work all the way around.
Yes, it is.
Outstanding. Now, how many volunteers do you roughly have right now for Gila County?
Right now we have about 25 volunteers.
And you need 100 and how many more?
We have 120 kids that need volunteers.
Wow.
So
And typically, how many, on the average, how many kids does one volunteer deal with?
usually the average is 2.5.
2.5. That half a kid, though, is real easy to deal with.
Yes.
Now, but obviously the needs are huge. So what types of people come and volunteer at CASA?
We have all types, all ages, everything from single parents who are in school and working full time to fully retired, people who have dedicated all of their time to the CASA program.
Right, and people from all walks of life, not necessarily people that have worked in behavioral health or something like that, but people that have done all kinds of different other work.
Correct. Some of our volunteers even come from similar past or even have been involved in the foster system in some way in their childhood.
So they have a profound level of empathy for knowing what it's like to be on the receiving end of some of the sad part of the story.
Correct. I think that also helps them understand the best way to help advocate for the children and make them feel supported too.
Wow. Yeah, and it's got to make the whole thing kind of come around full circle. I would think for someone like that, that's a beautiful thing. So if I signed up today to go through the training and everything, how long does it take me to get up to speed and actually become an official CASA volunteer?
Anywhere from 1.5 to 2 months right now.
Right.
A lot of that delay is due to our training schedule. We do one virtual class and one in-person class each month. So depending on what time the application comes in and how that lines up with the training, it can take up to 2 months.
But it's during that training, I know you mentioned before, as far as the the volunteer hours. Once you become a CASA volunteer, you're talking about 3 hours a week, roughly, give or take a little bit. When it comes to going through the training, how much time commitment is needed just during the training?
For the online virtual training, it's a 5-week program. It's 2 days a week for about 2 to 3 hours. The in-person is about 2.5 full days in person. Those trainings, unfortunately, right now we are not able to have in Gila County because we would have to have 6 people at once ready. But if we get 6 people at once ready to go through training, then the state office will send somebody up here to do it either in Payson or Globe.
Otherwise, they have to go down to where for the?
We can go to Flagstaff or down to the Mesa area, and I believe there's also some in Pinal County.
Okay. So during the summer, go up to Flagstaff and cool off, and
Yes.
now as we go into the winter, maybe down to the valley would be a better place. So how long have you been involved yourself? And it hasn't been terribly long.
I've been the CASA coordinator almost a year.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I worked for the Department of Child Safety for about 3 years, and I worked with CASAs on a majority of my cases.
So what prompted you to want to get involved in this?
It's something that I always wanted to do when my kids were still at home and little. I felt it would be difficult to separate their childhood from the traumatic childhood. So once they moved out and got settled and were stable, that's when I kind of redirected my career and started over again.
Wow, how cool is that? And obviously it's been gratifying for you.
It has been.
I mean, and that's something too, that when it comes to whether it's your job or something that you volunteer for, to really see the fruit of your labor in a very positive way in someone else's life is, I mean, that's got to be tremendously gratifying.
Yes.
Yeah, outstanding. Now, so if somebody wants to volunteer as a CASA volunteer, what's the first thing they need to do?
They need to go onto our website, which is www.casaofgilacounty.org.
Mhm.
and fill out an application.
And how long of an application is that? You know,
It's a short application. I think there's like 28 questions. The biggest thing you need to gather before you start is having 3 references along with their emails or phone numbers so we can contact them.
okay, so you have 3 people that'll hopefully speak positively about you.
Yes.
That would be a good start anyway. And then once that's turned in, then what's the next step?
If you don't hear from somebody from the office in about 48 hours, call us and we will follow up. Otherwise, if we get your application, we check for new applications 3 times a day, Monday through Friday, and we'll reach out and talk to them. The next step after that is we ask you to fill out an autobiography. That gives us an idea of not only your background, but kind of where you're at with your writing skills so we can gear the training towards your personal needs.
That makes sense. Again, once you're fully vetted and you've been trained and all of that, they're talking 3 to 5 hours a week, something like that. And typically, does that come all at one time? Where I know there's got to be a bunch of variables here, but I mean, typically, are we talking about oh, maybe I'll spend 3 hours on Friday afternoon, that's all I need to do this week, or is it like maybe an hour here, an hour there, and an hour? I mean, how does that typically break down?
It's pretty broken up. Usually there's like one meeting that's about an hour, and that could be with behavioral health or a meeting with the child or somebody else involved. About a half an hour on documenting your paperwork, and maybe another half hour on the phone with either another CASA or somebody at the office just bouncing ideas or asking questions.
And I would imagine to begin with, obviously some time spent with the child, just getting to know who they are and what they like and don't like and things like that. That's got to be kind of a critical ingredient right off the bat.
It is. Most of these kids want somebody to talk to and want somebody to come back when they say they're going to come back.
Right. And sadly, a lot of them in their regular lives have experienced quite the opposite, so that need maybe is a little bit exacerbated.
Correct. We do have some kids who have actually reached out to the CASA program to request a CASA. And when we talk to the child to ask them what they want from a CASA, they just want somebody to call them once a week to talk to them. Sometimes it's just that simple, picking up the phone and calling them.
Simple. Tragically sad that there's kids out there that are just needing that so much and not getting it. And really, the solution is you. So we hope that you will consider going online to casaofgilacounty.org and filling out an application there. Again, not a big time commitment. If you're retired, I mean, it's a piece of cake, but even if you're working, it sounds like something that you can, probably, depending on your job, of course, but you can probably work around and still make work without it really messing your schedule up a bunch. I mean, you're talking 3 to 5 hours a week. I mean, I stay busier than I want to be, but I think that amount of time wouldn't break the bank, wouldn't mess me up too much. I mean, I think most anybody could handle that with maybe just a little bit of schedule skill,
Yes.
hopefully.
Yes.
So, again, the idea is to go online to casaofgilacounty.org, fill out an application, and you say normally you'll be back in touch with them within 48 hours. If not, they should call you and ring somebody's bell a little bit. And
Yes.
I'm sure there's times where you all are all kinds of busy. Now, this CASA of Gila County, or excuse me, not of Gila County, but CASA in general, how long ago did that start again?
In Arizona, 35 years ago.
What about in the United States?
I think it's closer to 40 was when it became kind of more recognized.
Right. Now, does this, I know we got it in all 50 states now?
I believe so.
Yeah. Has there been any international attention to this? I mean, other countries that have said, hey, this looks like a smart idea or anything like that you know of?
Not that I know of. I know it's something that our national CASA organization is constantly watching and working on, is building those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the other programs that we work with within CASA actually go worldwide.
Typically, when you're meeting with one of the kids, the idea is you typically, I'm guessing, are always going to want to meet with that child on some kind of neutral ground somewhere.
correct. We normally suggest with the younger kids, like elementary school down to preschool, that they meet maybe in a park and start there as kind of a neutral setting before going into the home. A lot of the meetings do happen in the foster home or in the community.
Right.
The one place meetings will never happen is in the volunteer's home.
Right, and that just makes sense for a lot of obvious reasons. I mean, I would think that there are situations here where, I look back at in my life, we raised kids, we've got grandkids now that are in college, and spent a lot of years, doing the kid thing, if you will. And I would think there's got to be a lot of folks, later in their careers and stuff that would really find it kind of gratifying just to be able to get back into that kind of focus again of trying to be a mentor and a positive influence in a young person's life. I would think this would be really gratifying, like anything, if you approach it with the right attitude.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So again, not a lot of work, pretty easy to put together. Just go online to casaofgilacounty.org, but keep in mind that you are talking about maybe 3 to 5 hours a week, and there's going to be some times where there'll be slightly higher time constraints put on you, and other times where it might be slower. But what a huge difference you can make for the greater good in the life of a kid right here in Gila County. And if you're really into it and you have the time, consider volunteering to help kids not only here but also in other parts of the county. And I'm sure that with as many remote areas as we have in Gila County, that's got to be kind of difficult when we start talking about places like, Young or the San Carlos Reservation or places like that. I mean, there's those are a bit removed, so it's got to be even tougher for kids in some of those places, I would think, to find a CASA volunteer.
It can be. We are lucky, and we do get some grant money throughout the year that does help to reimburse our volunteers for the travel that they make to see the children on their cases,
right.
To help lessen that burden on them.
So when they do go to court on different issues, then this court-appointed special advocate is there to speak on the child's behalf, to articulate the needs and hopefully have the grander vision of what's ultimately needed for this kid, and be sure that they're speaking up for him. That's really the ultimate goal, right?
That's it.
Outstanding. Well, if you want to find out, can people just call down there to find out more?
They can call my office. My number is 928-474-7145.
All right, and again, that web address, casaofgilacounty.org. The phone number again, 928-474-7145. Again, Mariah Lance has been with us this morning talking about the CASA of Gila County. Keep up the good work and keep us posted. And if anything else that we can do to help get the word out, just know that we're here for you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You betcha. And thank you for tuning in and listening this morning. Going to get you back to more of your favorite music. Have some tunes coming up from Van Morrison, Neil Young, Blue Oyster Cult, Led Zeppelin, and more. But right now, a quick look at RIM Country weather.
Now with this morning's KRIM weather forecast for bases
Just like that.
surrounding areas.
Did that work okay for you?
That did.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. My pleasure. I think what you're doing is great.